shared now?
Yes.
Oh, right. Now the question is, if I go to it, does it all disappear? One second. So you're seeing that if I and it's not in slideshow mode. Slideshow mode now it is.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, and that's the first slide showing.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic! What a hero! All right, so what I'm going to try and show today is that I think most people are on track for doing the best that they can for climate action, climate change. But I think there are some actions which are less well known about than others, even though they're much more effective. So we're going to discuss today what we can do about that. So I'm going to go over the standards just to make sure that everyone sees them as the standard actions to be taken. And hopefully there's a useful list, if nothing else. And then we'll go and talk about what are the most effective actions, where we're going to focus on the impact, not the sort of public visibility that is much more appealing to people. So lots of people like planting trees, but planting trees is not necessarily the most effective way of combating climate change, at least not for another 100 years. So we're going to follow what's known as the impact principle. Right? What is the largest impact of what we're doing? Because a few actions simply produce most of the emission reductions that we can get around. So the following pictures are designed along this pyramid design, where the top of the pyramid, or the inverted pyramid, is the where you want to spend the most amount of effort and time in achieving things. And I don't think there are any great surprises here. The middle of the pyramid will show the medium actions, and the bottom bit is the bit that don't really deliver as much as one could be doing. So we're going to talk about individuals, parish and town councils, community organizations, and nature recovery. And the climate impact pyramid, I'm sorry about the lack of color on the left-hand side. I just didn't have the time to divide the pyramid into 3 sections. But the high impact actions are all pretty well known. And we're talking about individuals here. So fly much less often, install heat pumps, and anything like solar energy is, much to my surprise, considered to be a medium impact. But insulation is the greatest impact, obviously reducing your car use unless you have an electric vehicle. And as everyone knows who's seen the People's Emergency Briefing, you're going to have to switch to a plant-rich diet if we're all going to survive. So fewer cows for eating, more greens. No surprises there, really. Parish councils, I didn't come up with a pyramid for them because clearly it's felt that the major influence of parish councils is to influence people's thinking, to bring together people, show people what can be done, and then help manage the local land that belongs to the parish or its community land or whatever. But a lot of the actions you're going to be seeing are put together better by community organizations who are often part of or linked with parish councils, but they're the ones who seem to get the volunteers moving more effectively. And the big impact for them is getting people to change their social norms. So, just the habit of changing from reducing their car use to increasing the number of public transport trips they take, getting people involved, all those sorts of things are really where the community organizations can really play a part. And then having gone through those 3 types of individuals, parish councils, and community organizations, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the nature recovery pyramid, because this is where I found, for me, the highest number of surprises. So we're all involved, I'm sure, or we know about rewilding and wetlands and ponds. What I hadn't realized, which I'll get to in a second, is that the biggest container of carbon around is the soil itself. Reduced mowing has the impact on not only reducing our costs and putting much less toxic fumes from tractors and motor mowers, but you also get a double whammy of increasing the wilding. So hedges and wildflowers and habitat connectivity. I think we all know about making sort of holes in your fence for hedgehogs. And there's a big government-funded program on at the moment to encourage more hedgerows to be increased. So if any of you are farm owners or landowners, then you can get paid to increase your hedgerows. And as we're all probably aware, the fancy part of gardening, the ornamental planting and the beautiful formal lawns don't have a very large impact upon climate. So it's this statement that really bothered or surprised me. It's the soil itself beneath the plants that is storing the carbon. And as a general rule, a mature oak can contain several tons of carbon, but a meadow or wetland or a scrub habitat can store even more over time, and often does so more reliably. So I'm sorry to just be reading this out, but I thought it was a point worth mentioning. So then you come on to the question of, if you're going to be following the wilding or the tree planting, what are you going to do? What are the best ones? So I'm not going to read them all out. I'll just leave them here. And of course, this presentation will be put up on the knowledge base for anybody who wants to download it or to make a note of these particular species. The second point was the one that, again, surprised me, that many ecologists now regard scrub as one of our most undervalued habitats, because these are largely hedgerows and places do a lot about building soil carbon, supporting the insects and the birds, resilient to storms, which sounds very useful, and can develop naturally. And I thought the bottom line was also a surprise to me, that allowing scrub succession could be more effective than planting rows of trees. And of course, it's a lot quicker. You know, your scrubs are going to get going straight away, and the plants will be growing quickly. Whereas the trees are going to take 100 years or so before they become really effective at having locked up carbon. I mean, they've obviously been locking up carbon during that time, but I think Tristram has a feeling about the first 20 years when you're not doing as much as they will be doing during the next 20 or 40 years.
Graham, what's the definition of scrub?
That's a great question. It's like one of those things, you know it when you see it, don't you? But I should think heathland. Would that work? It's a good question. I'll look it up for you, Tristan, because I don't actually haven't thought about doing that definition.
There is one very quick definition, Tristram. It's what everybody else wants to destroy.
Yeah,
Really, it is. We have a real problem over this in the village.
right.
I've even had a bit of scrub near my house destroyed by the man who comes round and squirts weed killer over everything.
Ouch. Does he?
Jane wants to make a comment.
She wants to make...
I'm in Lydney, and if you go over the A48 south of Lydney, there's where the old Lydney dump used to be. And that is a fine example of scrub. It's just absolutely been left because it was the dump. It stopped being the dump, and now it's got short shrubby trees, brambles underground, low down. It's areas of grass where the rabbits eat the grass. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And yes, and people want to destroy it.
Because of it doesn't look good, because it doesn't feel good, or the brambles upset you?
Nothing upsets me. I think it's wonderful. And there are orchids in there, just orchids galore. I think one of the biggest troubles here is that, yes, I love that area. I call it Teasle Park because it was one of the first few plants that grew were teasels. So it was just like there were teasel everywhere. And I used to be on the Lydney Town Council, and I think it's because it could be used. There's this thing that says that here's this piece of land, we could use it for something. And so there was a group of cyclists wanted to go in and build one of these enormous racing tracks up on stilts, so that it's like a, going up and down and everything. But we managed to knock that on the head. I think the trouble is that if it's what we really need is we need something that's good for wildlife, but can also be good for human beings, and in which case some management is needed. So this area that used to have a lot of grassland, most of the grassland is now covered in brambles. There's cornus, there's hawthorn, there's so many trees coming, but unless we keep the brambles back slightly, unless we make some kind of path so that we can walk through it, it's just going to be an impenetrable thing, which is wonderful for wildlife. But it, one of the things about land that we should be doing is it's not just for wildlife, it's also for our own mental sanity, to have a place where we can go that is wild, that's not manicured, that's green and we can see the wildlife. So it's a bit of a conundrum, really.
Mm.
Well, it's a wonderful contrast with the sort of the stately homes where you go and see everything manicured and beautiful and gorgeous, but not an animal to be seen.
Absolutely.
And then,
so I think what you need is a nightingale. We're trying to get a nightingale on ours. That will turn it.
Well, it'll certainly it's the romantics. Yeah?
If you look at Knepp and places like that, they're still managed. They've put. I think one of the big things for Knepp is the amount of sorry, I'm very tired and I can't think straight, but big eating animals. So I think there's cows or buffaloes or longhorn cattle or something. There's pigs on there, because they maintain the place without having to go in with a scrub cutter or a lawnmower or what have you. It's just much more natural if you've got big wildlife in there doing it, but that will never happen in Lydney, I don't think, sadly.
I think what you've been saying supported my statement that I thought the parish councils have the job of managing the land to the best of their ability, particularly if it's not particularly owned by anybody, or they can persuade whoever does own it that actually it's good to let it follow some of the paths that we're laying down in this session.
Yeah.
So what I hope I've done is given people ideas of specific types of grassland and wildlife that really help the soil do its job of storing carbon. And I throw in the idea that we've recently had discussions about the job that worms do to help the land recover. And certainly where I am in the Isle of Wight, they are going hell for leather with worm farms to increase what they consider to be very depleted land. It's been agriculturally used for so many centuries that the land itself, the ground itself, needs a bit of a boost, and they're hoping the worms are going to do that. And in passing, I'm sure most people here have seen 6 inches of soil, but if you haven't, it's a 90-minute pastime of delight. It really is, to sort of see how important those first 6 inches are. And I also think that part of, or a major part of our job, and certainly I should have put on the parish council screen, is the education. That if people can be led to recognize that land that looks by our definition of untidy and not perfect and doesn't look good, then it could actually still be doing a lot more good than all the most beautifully trimmed lawns and rose bushes and so forth. So there's an educational aspect to all of this.
Graham,
Sorry.
Graham, can I just jump in?
Please do.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to your list of trees a second.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of point out that, you know, we also need to consider what trees to plant today that are actually going to survive in this climate for the next 20 years, let alone the next 100 years.
Yes, absolutely.
And I would just say that a very, very small sample, very local to where I am, that, you know, we've been planting oaks and hawthorn, that stuff, and they've been really struggling. But we found that white beams in particular have been coping very, very well in our local area with these conditions, surprisingly well compared to the other trees. So that is something that I would recommend at the moment in terms of tree planting.
Could I ask you, could you just put that comment into the chat, please? Because I'll pick it up from there.
Can I add a comment to that as well, though? I've just had a meeting yesterday regarding trees for some landscaping around a solar park development. We actually have 120 acres of common that if you looked at it, you would say it was scrub.
Right.
But actually, it's really heavily managed, and it has to be in order to stop the trees from taking over. So we probably spend £20,000 a year managing the land. But white beam, we looked at some white beam yesterday, and they are lovely trees, but they also drop branches quite easily. So you have to be a bit careful about where you put them, because if they're near footpaths or roads, they can become dangerous. We looked at one where some very large boughs had just fallen off of it. So that is another consideration.
That's really useful. Thank you very much. Good. But I'll add these comments in as, right, where were we with?
I actually looked up what scrub is, because you're right, you know what it looks like. And in fact, if you looked at our common, that's what you'd say it was scrub. But the definition says it refers to a type of terrain or ecosystem defined by dry, open land, primarily covered with low-growing, woody vegetation, such as shrubs, bushes, stunted trees, and grasses. And that is what our common's an SSSI, and it's mostly emergent silver birch and gorse, a lot of heather, and lots of other plants as well. Obviously, much rarer plants in the marshy areas and things, but a lot of these plants on this list. But if you look at it, primarily what you see are little clumps of young silver birch trees and a lot of gorse. But the gorse takes such a lot of management. We have to, every year, we're cutting and burning several acres of gorse in order to maintain a differentiation. Because if you just leave the gorse to grow, it will just take over. And then there's no space for wildlife at all. So in order to leave corridors between the gorse and also to create fire breaks, we have to really manage that and cut it quite heavily.
Wow, you can see where your costs are coming from. Yes. Yeah,
well, it is. Contractor costs are. We have really effective working party system where in the winter, between October and March, at least once a month, we have about 25 volunteers who are, some of them are chainsaw trained and some of them work in similar jobs. So they come and they have probably, we calculated last year, they saved us about £23,000 worth of work by volunteers doing the work.
Wow, fantastic. Moving on then, ponds appear to be particularly effective at carbon storage, and the plants, of course, that they support around their borders. So I know we were building a nature reserve in my old village in Somerset, and they insisted that we have at least 2 ponds up there, one in each of opposite corners, just because they do so much good. So again, having included a plant list, I hope that's helpful. And then how do we stop the carbon that is trapped in the soil or these plants from going back to the atmosphere, or stop it from going back to the atmosphere? So again, I've listed the actions here, but you need to leave the roots in the ground. minimise the digging. That should be good for the volunteers. Use mulch and compost and allow leaf litter to remain. And we've already mentioned reducing the mowing frequency. And the beauty is that if provided it's not touched by any of the things that we've mentioned above, then the soil carbon can remain for a very long time. If you already have mature vegetation, then there's a lot of carbon in a tree, but preserving the existing habitat usually beats replacing it. So if you've got your 120 acres or whatever it was of scrub or moorland or heath, whatever you wanted to call it, it sounds like it's better to keep it as scrub than it is to start producing trees there, unless of course they become a renewable source of income for people in years to come.
It's acid heathland, so we don't want mature trees. The trees are removed, but actually we can't leave any organic matter on it either because it's nutrient poor. So because of the types of plant that grow there, any vegetation we take off the common has to be removed from the common. We can't leave it there.
That's interesting. So there's legislation about that, isn't there?
It's all done in conjunction with Natural England, and we get a payment through from the Rural Payment Agency. So Natural England write a plan, a 10-year plan with us about how we're going to manage the common, and then we follow that.
So, sorry to interrupt, but can I just understand, when you remove stuff from the heathland, what happens to it?
Most of the gorse that is removed, we contract contractors who cut by hand, and they burn it on site. So because they're cutting by hand and feeding the fire fairly, we have a fire burning license as well. They feed the fire fairly slowly. Doing that, the fire burns hotter and more of it is vaporized, disappears. Anything else that's like a grassland that's cut, we have to take the clippings elsewhere and put them somewhere else. And
they get burnt in the end. I mean, all that carbon's returning to the atmosphere then?
Well, no, they don't get burnt. We have an area on the side of a car park where, so we've got a playing field area which is on the common. So all the grass clippings from that go into a compost area on the side of the car park. So where possible, we would remove. The problem with the gorse is it's extremely hard to deal with because it's so big and prickly. So actually getting vehicles into the areas where you're removing it from is not always possible. So it's extremely hard to remove that elsewhere. But even if you took it elsewhere, disposing of gorse is pretty difficult. Most of what we remove is gorse.
So, and how large is the compost area? I'm thinking of the places around the world that are using their compost heaps as sources of heat for heating houses and so forth.
Yeah, it's not that big.
Not that big.
I mean, how big is it? It's probably 15 foot long, I suppose, 20 foot long and 6 feet wide. I'm not actually sure what they do with it when it's rotted down. You put it somewhere.
And very, very, very high?
No, it's not very high. It's like the pallet, really.
Oh, right. Okay.
But we only mow the playing field, so it's not, a lot of the common that's being mown. Most of the common is heather, and they want to encourage that. So that's just left. And then the areas of gorse are cut and burnt. And most of the rest of it, if we cut trees down, they're left on site for habitat, and because the carbon is retained for longer as they rot down slowly over time. So anything like a tree that was cut down, either if it was a lot of tree, it'd be logged and piled up, or they would just leave a whole tree lying on the ground as a habitat.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so my next slide had the first item of avoiding burning. Bad luck. Routine scrub burning not suggested, recommended, but I guess you're being very careful with that course.
Can you hear that? It's a local farmer with his tractor just trying to get past someone outside my house.
Oh, right.
I think the problem is that the disposal options are limited for gorse, and we've had a lot of discussions this year because there are residents who aren't happy about the smoke.
Yes.
but which is, I'll go away because of the way they're asked to burn it. So we had an incident last winter where a different contractor loaded the fire with his mechanical digger, and he put a lot of gorse on all at once, which produced a huge amount of smoke, and that's actually really not a very good way of doing it. So by burning it, cutting it by hand and burning it, they are more effective at not creating smoke. Sorry about this. Got stuck, he couldn't get past. Yeah, that's the Natural England management plan, is to do that, but there is very little option really. But we have looked at other options of where to do it, where to put it and what to do with it. So we could chip it, but getting a chipper into the site where the gorse needs to be cut isn't always possible, and then you've got to get the gorse out of where it is to the chipper. I mean, you've got like 3 acres of cut gorse. That's going to take a lot of manpower. So really, it's a case of how do you deal with it?
And actually, if it was chipped, could you not have just a small area of the common? I understand that you're taking it away. You don't want to drop it down because you want the infertile land for what you're trying to keep it as it were. But could there not be a corner somewhere, like you've got a playing field in a corner? Could there not be a corner where shredded gorse got? We're still going to get the gorse out of where it is to that area. That's the problem. You can't get the machinery into where it is.
Complicated stuff.
Yeah.
So item 4 here on the screen is of particular interest to Tristram, who is watching how we improving the strength of wood with modern chemical works so that buildings can become much higher but wholly made of wood. So we've got skyscrapers in I think Stockholm is the last one I saw. Yeah. Where they are actually using timber in buildings much higher than you'd imagine timber could be used. So the best place to use timber if you've got, or a tree, if you've got to remove it, is to use it for building things. And the worst of the lot is to set fire to it. And if you've got wetlands, you want them to remain wet as much as possible. Very difficult in these hot, long summers, I know, but that exposes the stored organic matter to oxygen, and off you go with large quantities of carbon. So the weather really is against us in many ways. So if you wanted to sort of summarize where we are at that, you want to try and protect existing mature habitats with all their trees, because there's massive amount of carbon in those trees. Restore wetlands so that they are producing all of those plants around the edges and the insect and amphibian life. And I'm not just going to read this, it's all self-evident to you, but I did like that last statement. The most effective carbon capture technology available to us parish council is healthy soil. And it sounds, Emma, as if you're well on the way to working with that, and certainly in with the trials that are being run on the Isle of Wight with what worms can do to help restore the health of the soil. We'll keep you posted. I think the last slide is just to say that there are lots of things for groups to do, individuals to do, community organizations to do, listed on the Great Collaboration website. So if you're not familiar with the opening page, you can go down to this Go button, and clicking on the dark green to the left produces a whole list of options, and you just select the one that you want. And if people sign up as individuals and they leave a postcode, then the reports for the appropriate parish council are available from the website on what commitments have been made by individuals in your area. Just the idea, of course, is that you can harness their actions and help them to work more effectively together, rather more than Big Brother is watching what you're up to. But we can see. And that's as far as I got this year, or this round. So let me stop sharing and come back to seeing people. Oh, look at the hands. Fantastic. Frank, you look like you're first.
Right, thanks. And really, they're just nuances on what you were saying. So on trees, one thing that wasn't on your list, but willow and alder for remedial planting and riparian situations to strengthen riverbanks and to provide shade in rivers for aquatic species, we found a really significant add-on. And in some areas that are getting too boggy, I know that sounds unlikely for you down south, but it still happens up here. They can help dry up the land slightly. The pond planting you were talking about, we were also trying to encourage developers who are doing housing schemes when they've done their suds to look at things like yellow irises in the suds, because while they're not permanently wet, they're often wet, and native irises seem to flourish in that. The Emma's thing about not leaving the uprisings behind, absolutely, and we've been fighting constant battles with the council. The council wants to improve biodiversity and look at wildflower meadows. The challenge there is if you don't do cut and collect, the nitrogen from the grass cuttings goes straight back in and strengthen the grass and wreck everything else. So we need cut and collect. We also, and I say this as someone who's got, they're not blaming you in England, but one of the challenges is everyone thinks wildflowers and they see this picture of a classic English countryside wet meadow with cornflowers and poppies, and isn't that wonderful? And it's never going to look like that. And we've got to educate people as to what a wildflower area actually does look like and why the richness in diversity and the flowering at different times and so on. Having said that, moving away from ornamental plants, we've finally managed, and it happened on cost grounds rather than anything else, but the council's given up the idea of bedding plants and doing bedding plants. But there's an organisation we have called Beds for Bees that works with community groups and advises them on suitable perennials that will give them nice displays at particular times, but will give good ground cover, will thicken out, and are very pollinator friendly. So they'll be good in sort of wider sense. And last couple of points. One is when we're talking about, I know your focus was on community land. We've got some good farmers, and the problem is they are literally ostracized and pilloried by their fellow farmers. You know, farmers who are doing the right thing are not popular amongst other farmers, whether it's a kind of, no, we've been doing this for generations and we don't want to change, or whether it's because they recognize that that's actually the direction of travel. But we have farmers who are doing some great, we talked about mixed livestock grazing, where you put in your heavy cattle and your pigs, and they root around and they disturb and they help regenerate soil, and that's tremendous. I spent 3 hours last night at a farm up in Argati, which is one of the first in Scotland to introduce beavers. And I spent 3 hours watching a beaver pond and seeing the beavers at play. But there were literally death threats for the farmer when he introduced them in 2020 because the other farmers are anti-beaver on principle. You know, it's just one of those things. So we need to, as communities and as individuals, lionize our farmers who are doing the right thing to give them the confidence to try and do that and promote that. And then the last one I would just mention is when we're talking about grasslands, we're trying to get greater awareness of the concept of ancient grassland. So if you've had grassland that's been continuously grazed, so they've not ploughed it, they've not used additives, they've not done anything else for 100+ years, not only is it incredibly carbon rich in its own right, but it will probably be incredibly mycelium rich as well. And you'll get these incredible fungi crops, and they have a multiplier effect on the amount of carbon that's then held within the soil. So it's a really good news story. But we had one in one of our neighbouring villages where we managed to actually intervene, but the farmer was all set. He was fed up doing sheep grazing, which his family had been doing for hundreds of years. He was all set to plough it up and put in trees because he could get a grant for doing that, because everyone knows trees are good. Trees are the right thing to do. And we had to disrupt that. Luckily, there's a really good Dutch ecologist near us who did the surveys and found that we 20+ species of waxcap. So it's the richest waxcap site in Scotland. It's now going to be a triple SI. So that particular one's been nipped in the bud. But there's a general trend that we need to try and help people understand, as you were saying at the start, Graham. Trees are good, but they're not the only way of doing biodiversity. But there are good news stories out there. I live in a comparatively recent development that Taggart Mickle did in Scotland of 36 houses. At the edge, there are wilder areas. They did some sort of planting native hedging, but not particularly good. 3 years ago, I got together with the conservation volunteers and 8 families in the development, and we planted 780 hedging whips and young trees over the course of a weekend. The kids loved it. They were so enthusiastic. It was a lesson for them, and we're now beginning to see some of that coming through as untamed scrub or wilderness, whatever you want to call it. So there's lots of stuff, and I think that was a really good presentation, Graham, in terms of kickstarting it and making us rethink how we do it, and then we just localize the message and localize the impact into what works best in our areas.
You just highlighting how crucial this education bit is the poor old farmers getting lionised. That's awful. Yeah, well, thanks very much, Frank. I'm not quite sure, Sue, why you got displaced by David, but would Sue like to go first as a matter of courtesy?
Don't worry, it was my small points from me. So I picked up on your original list about education and the basic things, the list of what the town and parish councils can do. And I wanted to highlight the difficulty of messaging, because we find ourselves having to say the same thing because we have to keep saying the same message. Example, in our town council, the clerk suggests so-and-so plant. So we say, well, is that native? Oh, no. Okay. Could we have an example of a native one? And then the experts come in. So I want to build in that we need to think about what to do in relation to climate change and what trees should be used and suggested. But we find ourselves having to stick with the same message, otherwise we're not getting anywhere. And I find that balance difficult. We've managed to shift from no mow May to slow mow summer. And that's been, I took some convincing, but it actually has been at least setting our example. I'm down in the south in East Sussex, and it's a good, to do what's right for your environment, your climate is the right thing to do. And I was convinced, and I think we're getting there. The bit that I'd like to ask about, and we're highlighting, we're going back to soil. How do we know? How can we look after our soil? So the emphasis on this particular presentation is think about your soil. What have you got? What are you doing to look after it? We had some hints there, but how do we know? How can we tell our residents our soil is like this because we've got that, we've done that? So that's my question really after all those comments, which I've really loved the presentation. I'll definitely go back and look at the slides earlier on about the individuals and all that. That's great, the impact stuff.
Does anyone have an answer for Sue's question about the quality of the soil?
I was going to suggest to Jane about her patch of land that there are lots of local groups with lots of very expert knowledge, like wildlife trusts or Natural England. You could always ask for advice about your particular location. And so if you've got a patch of land which you want to leave to be more wild, it probably will still need some management, otherwise you'll just end up with brambles. So having some advice about what it would be suitable for. I mean, certainly talking about soil on our common, the common has very little soil because it's on chalk and it's mostly little gravel and it's mostly very thin. But we actually scrape some of the soil away in great big, like 250 long scrapes, because there's a particular rare butterfly on the common which needs bare earth or bare gravel and chalk to come and do its thing on. I don't know what it does to it, but so I just look out for local people that can give you advice. There are people out there.
Plenty of them, yes.
Sorry, Graham, could I come back with I'm interested to hear comments on soil, but could I come back with another point? I'm sorry.
Go on, Sue.
Thank you. Is that being patient with me? We, in our town council, we purchased from our biodiversity data centre our civil parishes data information, and that was useful. Paid about £80 for it, but it's a very high level data. But it in the data that the triple SIs haven't been inspected, looked at all for 20 odd years. The whole data is not very up to date. Just if anyone is thinking of purchasing for their parish, you know, it's a start, but also very difficult for a lay person to really interpret.
Thanks, Sue. David, you've been very patient.
Yes, looking at the high, medium, low impact things you did from the perspective of an urban parish with no land, it leads to different things. Mm-hmm. The biggest impact here would actually be getting the social housing providers to speed up retrofitting their houses, which they have to do by 2030 to get it to grade C. But it would make a lot of difference to do it earlier and go beyond C. They're very good on new houses, but they're actually bad at maintenance, let alone retrofitting the old ones. Now, the parish council can't do that. We don't own them. But we could do things that would encourage it, such as draft busters, which has worked in other places. That's only a small effect, but people learn about it. And the thing that some other groups have done, visits to houses with solar panels and heat pumps and so on, so people learn about that. And then on a bigger scale, it comes to the district and county councils, like setting up a heat network here because we're not far from a car factory. So that's beyond what we can do at our small scale. On the biodiversity side, we don't have much land. We do actually have a nature park. And we did actually have a local group, Nature in the Lees, bring round an ecologist. And the suggestions are to not do everything at once, but cut some of the brambles and leave the other ones for their biodiversity, do it the other way around next year, find places to stick a few benches for people to sit, arrange things for people to look at all the marsh harriers we have here. But it's not a large scale thing, so these are all small scale initiatives.
Well,
and the question I have is how can we mitigate or ameliorate climate change through a neighbourhood plan?
I don't think I can give you a 1 minute answer on that one, David. I'm very glad you asked that question. I'll try and find some answers, but I don't know. But Joan is laughing. Maybe Joan's got a point to make.
I just wanted to, it's a little bit in answer to Sue's question. I think that the town and parish council land and scrub land and that sort of thing is kind of one situation, but actually encouraging your local people to all the things that were actually on Graham's list in their own garden, because if we all create gardens that are good for wildlife, then even if 50% or even 20% of us create gardens for wildlife rather than gardens for flat lawns and petunias, it would make a vast area over England. If all that, so leading your individual householders onto, for instance, there's a and then that's to do with no dig and composting and mulching, and that just builds the worms in your garden, because our gardens, we kind of want to be fertile, because what we're growing in our gardens, well, I grow a lot to eat in my garden, so what we're growing in our gardens we want pretty flowers, we want and we want food to feed ourselves. Whereas Emma's kind of situation, or wildflower meadows and that sort of thing, it's the infertility you want. So there's where, when you're mowing, you need to take the cuttings away so that they don't refeed the land, so that you can get the meadow plants that would be growing in a meadow. We've got a wonderful, I'm in the Forest of Dean, and we have a Dean Meadows Society, and they encourage so many different landowners to make meadows on their land. But it's very different things that we do in different areas, and certainly encouraging people, gardeners, to do the no-dig method of gardening. And in fact, if you look up no-dig gardening, you'll find a chap called Charles Dowding, who does wonderful little videos and how to make new gardening beds just by putting down cardboard and a bit of compost on top, instead of trying to dig up all your turf and that sort of thing, which it keeps lots of carbon in and is very good for awareness.
Wow. I'm just having a note. Frank, would you like to roll on, please?
No, I think my points have been answered, so I'll withdraw.
Okay. We're on to Andrew then.
So just a quick one on neighbourhood plans. The first thing that's very, very important is that you must, in your neighbourhood plan, identify sufficient areas for building your allocation of houses, because that gives you a lot of leverage with developers not to touch things that you don't want to be touched. And the second thing that we've done is we've gone through NPPF and the local plan, and what we've done is selected various environmental policies from them, and we have simply interpreted them in terms of the village, so that's pretty well all I think that you need to do in the neighbourhood plan.
Actually, just quickly picking up on something, I think it was it David was saying about retrofit schemes and getting community housing involved. I do sometimes kind of fall out with some of my colleagues who I respect hugely who are working in this area in Scotland, because we have the concept of a just transition and the concept of making sure that no one gets left behind, and the concept of focusing on the people who will struggle with fuel poverty is really, really important. But the big difference will come from the people who have the discretion to keep paying the fuel bills but choose not to because they worry about the environment, or other. All the community schemes that we do, I don't think are going to have the impact that we're looking for. So I do think we need to try and reach out and get those who are well enough off that they don't really have to worry about food waste or about flying or about anything else, and get them to change their minds, or at least become involved and change some of their minds.
And I think that's going to become more and more important over the years as the groundswell from the People's Emergency Briefing, I think, grows. This will all be part of it, but absolutely. Penny, you've been very patient. Would you like to go now, please?
Thank you. Just a couple of points, really. One about allotments, which is my favourite subject, but just to say about neighbourhood plans, Weymouth have had one, what's the word, approved, last year, and there was a lot we couldn't put in, a lot of things that the community wanted around, environmental targets and protections for land that that couldn't be put there. So we started off with grand sort of ambitions and hopes that had to be watered down to sort of fit with the current, MPPF, which is, it's good on some things, but it hasn't got everything. And one of the ways we got round it is we developed something called a set of environmental targets that the council had as a document that was referenced in it, but we couldn't put it as part of the policy. We could only have it as an ambition, and it included a target for the standard of soil and how sites were left when developers moved off. So that might be of interest to have a look at. It's a rather large document, but you can pick and choose the bits if you're doing.
So are you going to add that to the chat?
I can do, yes. And then the other one is really just I'm just a resident, but I do work quite closely with the council, and we're going to have a scrutiny of our allotments coming up. Literally, it's just been approved and said that we can, partly because of the frustration of people like myself who are keen fans of Charles Dowding and no dig and permaculture, which is all about working with nature and the land and keeping the carbon, locked in. But our allotments are very much very denuded. The quality of the plots is very poor. And there's a lot of pressure on people to sort of dig it up, get it cultivated, rotivate it, and plant in rows. That feels so, well, just painful. I just get very upset about it. So I just want, the question is anybody doing anything with allotments in any of the parishes? And is there anything that we could learn from, as we go into a scrutiny sort of process, which I've never been in before, but I'm hoping we will be included as part of it. Thank you.
On to Gary, please. And thanks, Penny.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Frank's post about the red kites in Argotty, just to say that I spent many years living in Bonnybridge, just down the road, and never saw a red kite in my life. I've moved to North Wiltshire, and I see them pretty much every day now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they're a big success in the in this area of the country between, and they're now in Somerset as well. They've spread into Somerset. You'll be seeing them quite soon, I believe, Andrew.
We've got
They're
lots
definitely
here
heading
in
your
North
way.
Hampshire.
Okay. Well, thanks, Andrew, for your comment about the neighbourhood plan. Again, people will pick up on that. Back to Penny, and I'm going to have to say...
We have kites.
Yeah. I'm just announcing in advance, so I'm going to have to leave in 4 minutes, but if you're very welcome to stay on if someone else will host. Penny, you've dropped your call, so...
I hadn't put my hand down, sorry.
Oh, that's right. Well, I'm very grateful for all your attendance, and particularly the ideas and the conversations that you sparked. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that anyone else wants to add before I start running for trains? No, well, you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much. I would love to tell you what I'm going to be or what someone's going to be talking about next week, but I don't know yet. We live in such a well-organized society here. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the heat as best you can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Graham.
Everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.